The night was cold and the city was strange, filled with tall buildings that shined with alien lights, glowing colors running through the streets like veins of a living creature. The human walked slowly, his steps echoing against the empty walls, his hands deep in his worn coat pockets. He had been working late and was heading back to his small room at the edge of the city. He kept his head low, hoping to pass the night quietly without trouble. But tonight was not like other nights. The alley he chose was narrow and almost silent. Only the soft hum of the alien lamps filled the air. He felt the weight of the shadows pressing in around him. Something about the stillness felt wrong, as if the dark corners were watching him breathe. His heart began to beat a little faster, though he told himself he was only tired. Then he heard it, the sound that made him freeze. A faint shuffle, light footsteps, quick but uncertain. Following behind him, he turned sharply, eyes scanning the alley, but nothing was there. Only the flicker of a broken light and the whisper of the wind moving dust across the ground. He frowned and kept walking, his shoes tapping louder than before. But then again he heard it, closer this time. He stopped, his hand brushing the wall, his ears straining. And that was when it happened. Something small moved quickly from the side and pressed itself against him. Almost melting into his shadow, he gasped, ready to push it away. But when he looked down, he saw her. It was a girl, not human. Her skin faintly glowing with a soft pale light that seemed to shiver in the dark. Her large eyes were filled with fear. Shining like wet glass, her breathing came fast, as if she had been running for a long time. She crouched close to him, almost burying herself inside the outline of his body on the wall, hiding as if his shadow was the only shield she had left. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. The words not clear in his language, but the desperation was stronger than any translation. She looked at him the way a drowning soul looks at air, begging silently to be saved. The human stood frozen, his mind racing. Who was she? Why was she hiding? Why choose him of all people? He wanted to ask, but before he could speak, a sound rolled through the alley. A sound that made the girl flinch and press even closer. It was a strange clicking, harsh and sharp, echoing like claws against metal. The man looked up and saw movement at the far end of the alley, shadows bending unnaturally as tall figures moved slowly, their eyes glowing faintly red in the dim light. Hunters, he thought, though he had only heard rumors of them. Alien enforcers who chased down those marked as outcasts or rebels. Their presence filled the alley with a suffocating weight. The girl's hands clutched his sleeve tightly, trembling. Her lips moved fast in words he could not understand, but the meaning was clear. "Don't let them take me." Her entire body shook as though one wrong sound would betray her. He swallowed hard, feeling the cold sweat slide down his back. He could walk away, leave her there, pretend he never saw her. After all, she was not his problem. She was not even human, but something in her eyes, something fragile yet fierce, stopped him. He could not turn away. Not tonight. The hunter's steps grew louder, the strange clicking coming closer. Their shadows stretched along the walls, long and sharp like blades. The human pulled the girl gently behind him, his breath unsteady, and whispered the only words he thought she might understand. "Stay quiet." For a moment, time seemed frozen, the air heavy with fear. The human stood in the alley with a stranger pressed to his back, the hunters closing in, the city lights flickering above. He knew this night was about to change everything. He did not know why she had chosen his shadow, but now her fate and his were tied together. The footsteps stopped. The hunters sniffed the air, searching. The human pressed his body against the wall to hide the girl deeper in the shadow. He could feel her heartbeat pounding against his arm, the sound of it almost as loud as his own. He dared not breathe. Then one of the hunters leaned closer, its red eyes sweeping across the darkness, its sharp fingers scratching the wall. The human thought his heart would burst from the silence, but the shadow held, and for one moment longer they remained unseen. The girl's whisper reached him again, so soft he almost thought he imagined it. "Please, help me." And in that silent alley, under alien lights with hunters drawing near, the human realized that his ordinary life had ended the moment she stepped into his shadow. Whatever was coming next, it would shock him, test him, and perhaps break him, but there was no turning back now. The night was no longer silent. The alley that had felt heavy with stillness now throbbed with danger. The human stood frozen, his back pressed against the wall, the alien girl hiding in his shadow, her fingers digging into his sleeve as if letting go meant death. The red-eyed hunters at the far end moved slowly, their clicking voices echoing like metal teeth grinding against stone. The sound carried a rhythm of hunger, a rhythm of cruelty. The human's breath grew shallow, his eyes darting around the alley for escape. He saw only broken doors, piles of trash, and rusted pipes dripping with moisture. Nowhere safe, nowhere open. The girl pressed closer, whispering words in her alien tongue. He could not understand her speech, but he felt the meaning in her trembling voice. Please don't let them see me. Please don't leave me. The hunters paused, sniffing the air like beasts, their shadows stretched across the walls, their long claws glinting faintly in the light. The human swallowed hard, fear tightening his throat. He was just one man, unarmed, a worker with no power. Yet here he was, standing between this girl and something that looked more nightmare than real. He turned his head slightly, looking down at her, her eyes wide, shimmering like liquid silver, her lips quivering, and for the first time, he felt something deeper than fear. He felt the weight of her trust. She had chosen him, hidden in his shadow when hundreds of other strangers filled the city. Why him, he did not know, but in that moment, he understood one thing: if he walked away, her story would end here. The hunters moved again, their feet scraping the ground, the sound of clicking growing louder, sharper. The human gritted his teeth, his mind racing. He could not fight them, but he could run. He tugged her arm gently and whispered, "Come." The girl looked startled, but when the hunter's claws screeched against the wall, she obeyed. They darted toward a side path, their footsteps echoing wildly against the narrow walls. The human's heart pounded, his breath sharp. The girl's soft glow flickered with every step. He pulled her closer, trying to cover her light. The hunters roared behind them, their clicking turning into a chilling scream. The chase had begun. The alley twisted like a maze, dark doors slamming shut as frightened residents hid, windows glowing faintly as faces peeked out only to vanish in fear. No one wanted to be caught between hunters and prey. The human and the girl sprinted through the winding paths, their shadows stretching long in the pale lights. Left, the human muttered to himself, pulling her into another passage, his boots splashing in shallow puddles. The smell of damp metal and rotting trash filled his lungs. The girl stumbled once, nearly falling, but he caught her arm, steadying her. "Stay with me," he hissed. And she nodded, breathless, behind them. The hunters closed in, their speed unnatural, their claws scratching the ground with sparks. The human glanced back once. The sight burned into his mind, red eyes glowing, sharp teeth glinting, shadows leaping like fire. He pushed harder, dragging the girl forward. The alley split into two, one path dark and silent, the other glowing faintly with blue light. The girl tugged at his arm, whispering something urgent. Pointing toward the dark path, he hesitated. The glowing path looked safer, but her fear was sharp. Her voice desperate, he chose to trust her. They plunged into the dark. The darkness was thick, almost alive. The walls pressing close, pipes hissing with steam. The human's breath grew ragged, but the girl's faint glow lit their steps. He could hear the hunters behind them, closer, faster. The sound of claws against stone hammering in his ears. His chest ached, his legs burned, but he refused to stop. Then suddenly, a grate appeared ahead, loose and rusted. He shoved it aside with all his strength. The girl crawled through first, her small frame vanishing into the black beyond. He followed, dragging the grate back into place just as the hunter's shadows loomed at the corner. They tumbled into an abandoned passage. Damp and echoing with drops of water, the girl collapsed to her knees. Gasping, her hands shaking violently, the human bent over, clutching his chest, sweat dripping down his face for a moment. Only their breaths filled the silence. The girl looked at him, her wide silver eyes shimmering in the faint glow. She whispered again, her voice broken but filled with gratitude. "Shadow, safe." The words barely formed, but they struck him. She believed his shadow could protect her. She believed in him. The human leaned against the wall, listening for the hunters. Their clicks distant now, searching, frustrated. The grate had hidden their escape for the moment, but he knew it was not over. They would search again, and they would not stop until they found her. He looked down at the girl, fragile yet fierce, trembling yet unbroken, and he realized something dangerous, something that filled him with both fear and resolve. This was no accident, no random chance. She had chosen his shadow, and now her fate was his, whether he wanted it or not. And as the darkness pressed around them, the chase in the night had only begun. The hunters would return, and the truth of why she hid, why she ran, would soon be revealed. The old passage smelled of rust and damp stone. Water dripped from pipes above, echoing in the silence. The human leaned back against the wall, catching his breath while the alien girl sat close, her thin arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Her pale glow flickered like a dying flame. The sounds of the hunters were gone now, but their presence lingered like a shadow, heavy and suffocating. For a long moment, neither spoke. The human wiped sweat from his brow, his chest still rising and falling hard. He thought about turning back, about leaving her. This was not his fight, not his world. Yet when his eyes fell on her, curled up, trembling, whispering to herself in a tongue he could not understand, something inside him hardened. He could not leave her, not when she looked so fragile, not when she had clung to his shadow as if it were her only hope. He crouched down slowly, his voice low. "Who are you? Why are they after you?" She raised her head, silver eyes wet and shining in the faint glow. She parted her lips, but the words came broken, mixed with fear. "They want take me, they kill?" Her voice cracked, her small hands tightened into fists, and she pressed them to her chest, as if guarding something. The human noticed it then, the way her arms curled protectively over her body, not just in fear, but in defense, as though she carried something hidden, something more important than her own life. He leaned closer, his tone sharper. "What is it? What are you hiding?" The girl shook her head wildly, her braids whipping across her pale cheeks. "No, cannot, if you know. You die." Her voice broke with terror, but her eyes never left his, desperate for him to believe, desperate for him to stay. He frowned, the weight of her words sinking deep. Whatever secret she carried was worth her death, worth the hunter's endless chase, worth the risk of entire nights spent searching. He sat back against the wall, exhaling, and muttered, "So that's why they'll never stop." The girl shifted closer, her glow dimming. She whispered again, "I trust you." Her accent heavy, her words broken, but the meaning burned into him like fire. He felt her hand, small and trembling, touch his sleeve, and though fear twisted inside him, he did not pull away. The silence of the passage broke with a distant metallic clang. The hunters were still out there, searching, angry. The girl's glow flickered brighter for a moment. Panic flashing across her face, the human reached quickly, his rough hand covering hers, whispering, "Quiet. They'll hear." She stilled, her breathing shallow, but her eyes never looked away from him. He thought of the stories he had heard in the markets. Whispers of rebels, of stolen knowledge, of forbidden things. Stories told in half voices and silenced quickly now. Sitting here in this broken passage, with this girl hiding in his shadow, he realized those whispers were real. She was real. Minutes dragged like hours, until at last the sounds faded again. The girl shifted, finally breaking the heavy silence, her words soft, as though she had decided something. "I show you," she whispered, her hands moving slowly, trembling. She pulled something from beneath the folds of her torn clothes. Hidden tight against her chest, the human's eyes widened. It was small, glowing faintly, a crystal-like object pulsing with soft blue light. Alive, not machine, not stone, but something in between. It seemed to breathe in her hands. He felt the air around it shift, the hairs on his arm standing on end. "What is that?" he whispered, his voice cracking. The girl's lips trembled, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "Heart of my people," she said, her voice almost breaking. "Stolen. Forbidden. If they catch, they destroy. Me, destroy it, destroy hope." Her small fingers curled tighter around it, as if afraid it would be ripped from her even now. The human stared, his mind racing. This was no simple runaway. No child lost in the night. This girl carried something greater, something dangerous enough that hunters would kill without hesitation. He understood now. She was more than a frightened alien hiding in his shadow. She was the key to something far larger. Her tears rolled down her pale cheeks as she whispered, "I cannot run forever. They find me, they kill me, but your shadow hide me." She looked at him with eyes so full of desperation that his chest ached. She had chosen him, trusted him, given him her truth. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply, the weight of her secret pressing heavy on his shoulders. He was just a human, one man with no power, no weapons, no reason to stand against hunters of another world. Yet now he could not turn away, not after seeing what she held, not after hearing her trembling voice. When he opened his eyes again, the girl was watching him, waiting, her glow faint but steady, the crystal pulsing softly in her hands. He whispered slowly, each word heavy with promise, "Then I'll keep you safe." "As long as I can," her lips parted, her eyes shining brighter. And for the first time since he had seen her, she gave a small, broken smile, but before he could speak more, the distant sound returned, sharper now, closer. The hunters had found their trail again. The girl gasped, hiding the crystal quickly, her glow flickering with fear. The human stood, pulling her to her feet, his jaw tight. "Come on, we move now." The passage shook faintly with the hunter's footsteps. The chase was not over, but now the human knew the truth. He knew what she carried, and he knew one thing for certain. If she fell into their hands, it would not only be her end. It might be the end of much more. And in that dark passage, with the hunters closing in again, the hidden truth bound them together. Two strangers from different worlds standing on the edge of something far greater than either of them could imagine. The air inside the passage grew heavy. Every drop of water falling from the pipe sounded like a hammer in the dark. The human gripped the alien girl's hand tightly, pulling her forward, his steps quick but careful. Her glow had dimmed almost to nothing, but still he feared the hunters could sense it, their red eyes cutting through walls, their claws scraping stone, their shadows stretching longer with every step. The girl clung close, her breath shallow, the small crystal hidden again beneath her clothes. She whispered something under her breath, a prayer or maybe a warning. He could not tell, but he felt her fear wrapping around him like chains, and he realized he feared too. He was only human, flesh and bone, against creatures who looked like death given form. Yet he did not stop. Suddenly the sound came, sharp and loud, a metallic screech echoing through the tunnels. The hunters were near, their clicking voices bouncing off the walls. The girl froze, her knees trembling, but the human pulled her against the wall, pressing a finger to his lips. "Quiet," he whispered, his own heart pounding like thunder. The light at the end of the passage flickered, and then a shadow stretched across it, long and jagged. One of the hunters stepped into view, its frame towering, its limbs bending in unnatural angles, its glowing eyes sweeping through the dark like burning coals, its claws dragged against the walls, sparks flying with every scrape. The human pressed the girl deeper into the shadow of a broken pipe, his body shielding her. The hunter's steps echoed closer, its nose lifting as if it could taste their fear in the air. The girl's small hand gripped his arm, her nails digging in, her whisper trembling. "They smell?" "They always smell." He held his breath, his chest screaming for air. The hunter paused only a few steps away, its head turning sharply, eyes glowing brighter. The silence was unbearable. He thought they were caught, but then a sound came from far down the tunnel, a crash of metal. Maybe another pipe falling. Maybe just the city itself groaning. The hunter hissed, turned its head and moved away, the clicking fading again. The girl collapsed against him, her forehead pressing into his chest, her whisper shaking. "So close, too close." He placed a hand gently on her back, steadying her. "We have to keep moving," he said. His voice low but firm. She nodded weakly, wiping her face with trembling hands. They slipped deeper into the tunnels, the path twisting like a maze, sometimes opening into wide chambers filled with dripping water, sometimes narrowing until they had to crawl on their knees. The human's arms ached, his legs burned, but he refused to stop, every step echoing with the hunter's shadow close behind. At one point they entered a chamber with a broken ceiling, faint moonlight spilling through the cracks. The girl stopped, staring at the light as if it were a blessing. Her glow brightened for a moment, reflecting in her silver eyes. The human almost let her rest, but then he saw it, on the wall above them. Another shadow moved, long claws stretching across the stone. The hunters were circling them. Panic surged. He grabbed her hand, pulling her sharply into a side tunnel, just as the hunter dropped down behind them with a thunderous crash, its roar rattling the stone, claws striking the ground where they had stood only moments before. The girl cried out softly, but he pulled her faster, their footsteps slapping against the wet floor. The tunnel grew darker, narrower, the air tighter. He could hear the hunter following, scraping its claws against the walls, sparks lighting up the darkness in flashes, every spark showing its twisted face, its glowing eyes, its mouth opening in a hiss that made his skin crawl. The human's mind raced. He needed to lose it, but how? His eyes searched desperately, and then he saw it, a collapsed section of tunnel ahead, broken stones leaving only a small gap at the bottom. He didn't think. He dropped to his knees and pushed the girl through first, her small frame sliding into the gap. She turned, reaching her glowing hands back, whispering, "You too, hurry." He shoved himself into the gap, his shoulders scraping hard against the stone, pain burning down his side. The hunter's claws slashed behind him, sparks flying, one claw catching the back of his coat, tearing fabric but missing skin. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself through, rocks cutting his arms until finally he tumbled into the other side. Gasping for breath, the girl caught his hand, pulling weakly, her glow trembling, tears on her face. You safe, she whispered over and over as if saying it could make it true. He looked at her, her small form shaking, her trust shining through her fear, and he realized again he was not just running for her. He was running with her. The hunter's claws scraped at the collapsed stones, but the gap was too small. Their growls filled the air, angry, frustrated, but distant for now. The human sat back against the wall, sweat dripping, chest burning. He whispered, "We bought time." But not much. The girl leaned against him, whispering something soft, words broken but heavy with meaning. "Your shadow, stronger than theirs." He blinked, looking down at her, not sure what she meant. But her eyes glowed faintly, her small smile breaking through the fear, and in that moment, with hunters raging on the other side of the stones, with the darkness pressing close, he understood the truth. The enemy's shadow was long and terrifying, but his own shadow, the one she had chosen to hide in, was the only place she felt safe, and that gave him a strength he did not know he carried. But the hunters would not stop. They never stopped. And deep down he knew the real fight had yet to come. The night was far from over, and the enemy's shadow still followed, waiting to strike again. The tunnel was silent again. Only the soft drip of water falling from the ceiling echoed in the dark. The human sat with his back against the cold wall, his chest rising and falling, his arms sore from pulling himself through the narrow gap. The alien girl leaned beside him, her glow faint, her breath shaky, her silver eyes staring at the ground as if her thoughts weighed heavier than the hunters behind them. For a long moment neither spoke. The human stared into the darkness ahead, wondering how much longer they could run, how long before the hunters found another path to circle them. He was tired, his body weak, but the sight of the girl trembling beside him forced him to stay alert. He could not let her break if she broke. Both of them were finished. At last she raised her eyes to him, her voice soft, broken. "Why, help me." The words were heavy with struggle, but he understood them clearly. Her question cut straight through the silence, his brows furrowed. He thought of his small room at the edge of the city, the life of a man ignored by everyone, invisible. He could have walked away in that alley, left her to her fate. Yet here he was, bleeding, running, fighting shadows. He answered slowly, his voice low, "Because you chose me." Her lips parted, her eyes shining with confusion. He leaned closer, his tone steady. "Out of everyone in this city, you ran to me, you hid in my shadow, I couldn't turn away." Her eyes softened, tears gathering at the edges, her voice trembling. "Your shadow, safe. Their light cannot find me." She pressed a hand gently against his chest, her palm warm against his torn coat. "I trust you." Those words struck him harder than any blow. Trust. It was a word he had not heard in so long. Trust was something rare in this city, something dangerous, but here it was, offered by a stranger, a girl not even of his kind. And it felt heavier than the hunter's claws, heavier than the danger pressing in from all sides. The girl shifted closer, curling into his side, her small frame trembling. She whispered broken words in her language. He could not understand, but her tone was soft, fragile, filled with something that sounded almost like hope. He placed a careful arm around her shoulders, steadying her, feeling her relax just slightly under his touch. In that dark tunnel their bond began to form. Not of blood, not of language, but of survival. Two strangers with nothing in common except the hunters that wanted them dead. And yet in that moment it felt like more. It felt like the world itself had forced them together for a reason he could not yet see. The silence was broken by a low rumble in the distance, the ground trembling faintly beneath them. The hunters were still moving, searching, their anger shaking the walls. The girl stiffened, fear flashing across her face. But the human squeezed her shoulder, whispering, "We'll find a way," his voice steady, even though doubt twisted inside him. The girl lifted her face, her silver eyes shimmering faintly. "You, brave," she whispered, her words heavy with awe. "Human, weak but brave." She touched her chest where the crystal lay hidden. "My people, forget brave, only strong, only cruel." Her eyes filled with sorrow, tears sliding down her cheeks. Different, they hunt me." The human studied her, her glow soft, her face streaked with tears, and for the first time, he began to understand. She was not just running because of the crystal. She was running because she was not like the rest. She was hunted because she chose a different path, and in her eyes, he saw the same loneliness he carried himself. He whispered back, his tone firm, "You're not weak. Not for running, not for hiding. It takes strength to survive." She blinked, staring at him, her lips parting in surprise. No one had told her that before. He could see it in the way her shoulders shook, in the way her tears fell harder. She whispered, almost breaking, "You see me. His chest tightened at those words. He had lived years being unseen, ignored by everyone, forgotten in the crowd. And now this girl spoke the same pain. He reached up, gently brushing the tears from her cheek, whispering, "I see you. I won't let them take you." The bond between them deepened in the silence, fragile but unbreakable. Two strangers who should have never met, yet who now shared something that neither could deny. But the peace lasted only a moment. The sharp clicking sound returned, louder, closer. The hunters were near again, their shadows stretching long through the cracks of the tunnel. The human stood quickly, pulling the girl to her feet. His voice sharp. "We move," she nodded, gripping his hand tightly, her glow flickering brighter now, not with fear, but with determination as they stepped into the darkness ahead. He felt her small fingers wrapped firmly around his own, her trust holding him stronger than any weapon could. And as they ran, the human realized something chilling. The hunters were not just after her crystal, not just after her life. They were after what she carried inside: hope, courage, trust, things their world had long forgotten, things that now bound the two of them together. The bond of strangers had been forged, and it would be tested in fire before the night was through. The tunnel twisted sharply and ended in a wide chamber, its walls cracked and wet. Broken beams scattered across the floor. The human slowed as he entered, his eyes scanning quickly for another way out, but there was none. Only stone walls closing them in. The chamber was a dead end. His chest tightened. He turned back, the girl's glow faint and trembling, and in that moment he knew. The hunters would trap them here. The girl's breathing grew fast, panic flooding her silver eyes. "No way, no way," she whispered, her voice shaking, her small hands clutching his sleeve. She pressed herself against him as if she could vanish into his body. The crystal hidden against her chest pulsed faintly, its light echoing her fear. The human swallowed hard, sweat dripping down his face. He had no weapons, no strength to match the hunters, yet he had no choice. He had to stand. The clicking sound returned, louder now, filling the tunnels. Echoing through the chamber walls, the hunters were coming. Their shadows stretched into the room before their bodies did, long and sharp like claws made of darkness. The human pulled the girl behind a broken pillar, his voice low but firm. "Stay here." She shook her head wildly, tears already in her eyes. "No, they kill you." Her words broke, her glow flickered. She clung to his arm desperately, but he pulled free, his eyes fierce for the first time. "I won't let them touch you." His voice was rough, filled with a strength he did not know he had. The chamber trembled as the hunters entered. 3 of them, their red eyes glowing like fire in the dark, their bodies bent and twisted, their claws scraping across stone. The sound sharp and unbearable, they hissed in unison, their voices like knives slicing through the air. The girl whimpered softly, pressing her hands to her mouth. The human stepped forward, his shadow stretching long under the faint light. He picked up a broken beam from the ground, its wood cracked and heavy. It was nothing compared to their claws, but it was all he had. He raised it, his hand steady despite the fear clawing inside his chest. The hunters laughed, a sound like broken glass. Mocking him, one stepped closer, towering above him, its red eyes burning. The girl whispered from behind the pillar, her voice breaking, "Please, don't fight, they kill you." But the human's voice rang louder now, echoing off the chamber walls. "If I fall standing." His words cut through the darkness. The hunters hissed louder, anger rising. The first hunter lunged, claws slashing through the air. The human swung the beam with all his strength. The clash shook his arms, sparks flying as wood met metal. The beam cracked, but the hunter stumbled back with a hiss. Surprised, the human gritted his teeth, standing tall again, his shadow long and defiant. The second hunter circled, fast and sharp, its claws reaching for his side. The human twisted, ducking low, shoving the broken beam upward. The strike caught the hunter in its jaw, snapping its head back. Pain jolted through his arms, but he did not let go. He roared, his voice echoing, not in fear, but in fury, behind him. The girl's eyes widened, her body trembling, something inside her stirring. The crystal against her chest pulsed brighter. Responding to his courage, his defiance, her whisper escaped. "Shadow, brave." Tears rolled down her cheeks, but this time they were not only from fear. The third hunter leapt forward, claws aimed straight for the girl. The human's eyes widened, rage burning in his chest. He threw himself in front of her. The claws slashed across his arm, blood spraying, pain ripping through him, but he did not fall. He shoved the beam forward with a desperate cry, driving it into the hunter's chest. The sound of splintering echoed. The creature hissed in rage. Stumbling back, the girl screamed, her glow bursting suddenly, the crystal in her chest shining so bright it lit the chamber like fire. The hunters froze, their red eyes flickering with fear. The girl stepped forward from behind the pillar, her small frame shaking but her glow growing. Light pouring from her skin, her voice no longer broken but strong. "You will not take him. You will not take me," the hunters hissed, shielding their eyes, their shadows twisting wildly on the walls. The girl raised her hands, the crystal pulsing with every beat of her heart, and the light exploded outward, tearing through the chamber like a storm. The hunters screamed, their shadows burning, their claws melting into smoke, and one by one they stumbled back, retreating, hissing in pain until the chamber was empty. Silence fell, the girl collapsed, her glow dimming. The human dropped the shattered beam, his arm bleeding heavily. He caught her before she fell to the ground, holding her close, her face pressed into his chest. She whispered weakly, "You save me, I save you," her silver eyes closing. He held her tightly, blood dripping onto the floor, his body weak but his spirit burning. He had stood against monsters with nothing but broken wood, and she had unleashed a light that even shadows feared. Together they had turned the impossible into survival. The chamber was still, the air heavy with the scent of smoke and blood. The human leaned against the wall, cradling her close, whispering, "It's not over, but they'll think twice now." His voice steady despite the pain, he looked down at her fragile frame, her glow flickering faintly, and for the first time, he felt something stronger than fear inside him. Hope. The last stand was not the end. It was the beginning of something greater. Something that would shake more than just this dark city. The chamber was silent, smoke curling upward from the scorched stones where the hunters had stood moments before. The human leaned against the cracked wall, his arm bleeding, his body trembling with exhaustion, yet his eyes stayed open, sharp, watching the alien girl who lay in his arms. Her glow faint but steady, her breathing shallow but alive. He looked down at her, brushing strands of her pale hair from her damp face, and whispered softly, "You're safe now." Though he wasn't sure if the words were true, the hunters had been driven back, but he knew they were not gone. Creatures like that never stopped. They would return, stronger, angrier, still hungry for the crystal she carried. The girl stirred, her silver eyes fluttering open. Weak but shining, she lifted a trembling hand, brushing his chest as if to make sure he was real. Her lips parted, her voice fragile. "You plead." He gave a faint smile despite the pain running through his veins. "Better me than you," his voice steady. And in his words she heard a truth that made her eyes fill with tears. She sat up slowly, clutching the crystal against her chest. Its glow dim but pulsing. As if alive, she whispered, "They fear this. They fear me." Her words broken, but there was strength hidden in them, strength that had not been there before. The human studied her face, once only trembling with fear, now lit with something new, something unshakable. Outside, faint light began to creep into the cracks of the chamber, dawn rising above the alien city. The hunter's shadows no longer stretched so deep. The girl's glow reflected in the faint sunlight. And for the first time, she did not look like prey. She looked like something more. The human stood slowly, his legs weak but steady. Offering his hand to her, she hesitated, then placed her small fingers in his, gripping tightly, her voice soft but full of promise. Together, he nodded, his shadow stretching behind them as the first rays of the sun poured through the broken ceiling. They climbed out of the collapsed passage, emerging into the streets above, the city still quiet, its tall towers glowing faintly in the morning light. Faces peeked from windows, eyes watching, whispers rising. Alien stared at the human with his arm bloodied, the strange girl at his side glowing faintly, the crystal hidden but its power lingering in the air. The girl walked closer to him, pressing against his side, her fear still there but softened by something stronger, trust. The human lifted his head, no longer walking like a man alone, but like someone carrying a purpose. The whispers of the crowd followed them. Who is she? What is that light? Why does she stay with him? But neither slowed. At the edge of the street, a group of hunters' servants appeared, smaller creatures with hollow eyes, but they did not attack. They froze at the sight of the girl glowing in the morning sun, at the sight of the human's shadow wrapping around her like a shield. They backed away, their fear greater than their orders. The girl squeezed his hand, her silver eyes rising to meet his. She whispered softly, "They see us now. They cannot unsee." Her words trembled, but he felt the truth in them. They had done more than survive. They had been seen, And that was the first step toward change. As the sun climbed higher, the hunters' cries echoed faintly from the distance. Furious, broken, but not victorious, the girl stood tall for the first time, no longer hiding, her glow brighter in the sunlight, her voice steady. They will come again, but I not run. Not anymore. Her hand gripped the crystal tightly, her other hand clinging to his. You fight, I shine. Together strong, the human looked at her. At the fragile figure who had once cowered in his shadow, now standing with a fire that outshone her glow, and he realized something powerful. She had chosen him not by accident, but because his shadow was different, not empty, not cruel, but filled with courage. It was a place where light could grow. He squeezed her hand firmly, his voice calm but filled with strength. Then let them come. They'll find we're not so easy to break. She smiled faintly, her tears mixing with the light on her face, her glow wrapping softly around them both. The crowd that had gathered whispered louder. Some in fear, some in awe, and in that moment change began to spread. Not from soldiers, not from rulers, but from a frightened girl who had chosen to trust, and a human who had chosen not to let go. Together they stepped forward into the morning, their shadows long, their bond unbroken, the hunter's rage echoing behind them but unable to touch them now. The dawn had come, and with it something new, something that even the darkest shadows could not smother. The dawn of change had begun, and it carried their names. A fragile alien girl who glowed in the dark, and a human who stood when no one else would.